You stand on cobbled streets, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. It is a time before pharmacies, before hospitals, a world where healing often walked hand in hand with mystery. Imagine a quiet cottage at the edge of the village, smoke curling from its chimney. Here, within these humble walls, lived a figure both revered and feared, the medieval midwife. She was the keeper of life's most intimate secrets, a woman of deep knowledge passed down through generations. Her medicines were not pills or injections, but a strange and potent blend of nature's bounty and ancient belief. You are about to discover the unexpected wisdom, and sometimes unsettling practices, that defined her unique way of healing. From potent herbs to whispered charms, you will journey into her world. To truly understand her world, you must first understand how she came to know its depths. Imagine a young girl, perhaps no more than 8 or 9 years old, her future already etched by the hands of her mother, or her aunt, the village midwife. This was not a profession one chose from a list of options. It was a calling, a legacy passed down, often within families, a demanding apprenticeship begun long before formal schooling was even a dream. You see her, a small figure, moving quietly within the cozy, herb-scented cottage. Her days are not spent with dolls or childhood games, but in observation and service. Her first lessons are not from books, but from the rhythms of the house and the natural world just beyond its door. She learns to keep the hearth fire burning, a steady, essential warmth, just as she will one day learn to maintain a mother's vital flame. She helps her mentor grind dried herbs with a stone mortar and pestle, the rhythmic thud a soundtrack to her learning. The air is thick with the sweet, pungent aroma of mugwort, the sharp tang of yarrow, the earthy whisper of valerian. These scents become as familiar as the smell of her own skin. Her education begins in the midwife's garden, a patch of cultivated chaos nestled behind the cottage. You stoop with her, your fingers tracing the delicate leaves of lady's mantle, its cupped leaves holding dew like tiny emerald chalices. The midwife points out each plant, whispering its name and purpose. This, my dear, is raspberry leaf, a friend to women, strengthening the womb. Or here, see the willow? Its bark can ease the aches that plague us. You learn that plants are not merely green things but living allies, each with its own story, its own power. The apprentice learns when to harvest, the moon's phase, the time of day, whether the root, leaf, or flower is desired. You watch as she gathers mugwort under the soft glow of a full moon, believing its potency to be at its peak. She learns to speak to the plants, to offer thanks, to take only what is needed, understanding that nature gives generously but must be respected. This is not superstition to her, it is a profound connection to the life force that permeates all things. Beyond the garden, the wild lands become her classroom. You walk with her along hedgerows, scanning for hawthorn berries or rose hips, rich in vital essence. She learns to distinguish the delicate white flowers of yarrow, known for staunching blood, from other similar-looking plants. In damp, shadowy woods, she seeks out the broad leaves of comfrey, revered for mending bones and wounds, though its internal use is approached with caution and deep knowledge of its powerful properties. She discovers the calming properties of chamomile in sunny meadows and the sleep-inducing virtues of poppy seeds, used judiciously from specific varieties. Each foraging trip is a lesson in botany, ecology, and the careful stewardship of the land. Back in the cottage, the real alchemy begins. You watch as she carefully cleans and sorts the gathered bounty. Roots are scrubbed, leaves are laid on drying racks above the warm hearth, flowers are hung in bundles. The drying process is slow, deliberate, transforming fresh vitality into concentrated essence. She learns to make infusions, steeping dried herbs in hot water for comforting teas that soothe a nervous mother or calm a colicky infant. She learns decoctions, boiling tougher roots and barks for longer periods to extract their deepest compounds. You witness her learn the art of the poultice. She pounds fresh plant material with a mortar and pestle, sometimes mixing it with warm gruel or a bit of rendered animal fat to create a thick, soothing paste. This is spread onto linen and applied to inflamed skin, aches, or minor wounds. Salves are created by infusing oils with herbs, then mixing with beeswax to create a protective, healing balm. Every step, from grinding the rough leaves to stirring the simmering oils, is practiced until it becomes second nature, a part of her very being. But the midwife's knowledge extends far beyond herbs. You see her observe her mentor as she attends to the women of the village. She learns to read the subtle signs of the body, the color of skin, the flush in the cheeks, the quality of breath, the rhythm of labor pains. She learns the importance of touch, a comforting hand on a fevered brow, a firm but gentle pressure during childbirth. She watches her mentor clean and comfort newborns, wrap them in soft cloths, and counsel new mothers on breastfeeding and self-care. She learns to distinguish a normal birth from one that portends difficulty, relying on intuition honed by years of ancestral wisdom and countless observed experiences. The apprentice learns about positions for labor, the calming power of a warm bath, and the importance of patience. She learns when to encourage, when to soothe, and when to send for spiritual aid, understanding that the line between body and spirit is often blurred in the medieval mind. Beyond the dramatic event of childbirth, the apprentice learns about the entire cycle of women's lives. You hear whispers of remedies for menstrual discomfort, concoctions to aid fertility, or infusions to ease the passage into menopause. She learns to listen not just with her ears, but with her heart, to the fears and anxieties of women in a world where their bodies were often poorly understood and sometimes even mistrusted. She becomes a confidant, a protector of intimate secrets. The mystical element is woven into every strand of her learning. You witness her mentor murmur ancient charms over a difficult birth, or tie specific knots with red thread to ward off ill fortune. These are not separate from the herbs. They are an integral part of the healing process. They offer reassurance, instill faith, and connect the physical act of healing to the broader spiritual framework of their world. The apprentice understands that a mother's belief in a charm can be as potent as a dose of soothing tea, calming her mind and thus her body. Years pass. The young girl grows into a young woman, her hands now sure, her knowledge deep. She assists more often, her mentor gradually stepping back, allowing her to take the lead. You see the community's trust in her grow, first tentative, then absolute. She has proven her capability, her compassion, her connection to the life-giving forces of the earth. She is no longer just an apprentice. She is a practitioner in her own right, ready to shoulder the immense responsibility of bringing new life into the world, of easing suffering, and of serving as a vital link between the natural world and the human spirit. Her training never truly ends. Each birth, each illness, each passing season brings new lessons, new wisdom to add to the rich tapestry of her craft. She becomes the next generation's keeper of the hearth, the garden, and the deepest mysteries of life itself. You feel the cool, damp earth beneath your worn leather boots as you step away from the village's last few cottages. The familiar scent of wood smoke gives way to the fresher, sharper perfume of damp soil and ancient trees. You are not alone on this journey. The midwife, now fully recognized as a healer, walks beside you, her eyes scanning the forest floor and the low-hanging branches with an intensity that borders on reverence. She carries a woven basket, its empty belly waiting to be filled with the raw power of the earth. This is not merely a walk for gathering. This is a pilgrimage. For the medieval midwife, the sacred grove, the wild edges of the forest, the sun-dappled clearings, and the banks of winding streams were her most vital pharmacies. Here, far from the bustling marketplace or the monastic libraries, she found the living ingredients for her strange medicines, the remedies that would soothe, heal, or sometimes tragically fail. You notice her movements are deliberate, almost ritualistic. She stoops not just to pick but to commune. Her fingers, strong and calloused from years of birthing and kneading dough, gently touch the leaves, the bark, the moss. She speaks in soft murmurs, perhaps a forgotten prayer or a whispered thank you to the plant spirit. For her, each root and blossom possesses not only a physical essence but also a spiritual one, a vital force to be respected and harnessed. The sun dapples through the canopy, creating shifting patterns on the forest floor as you follow her deeper into the woods. She points out a patch of broad, dark green leaves. "Comfrey," she explains, her voice a low, clear hum. "Bone it. For sprains and bruises, a poultice from its root and leaves. It eases the ache and helps the flesh mend." You watch as she carefully harvests a few choice leaves, leaving the rest to flourish. This intimate knowledge of growth and regeneration is part of her craft, a sustainable wisdom passed down through generations of women. A little further, she stops by a gnarled oak, its ancient limbs reaching towards the sky. From its branches, she strips a small amount of bark, explaining its use as an astringent, perhaps for staunching blood flow after a difficult birth, or for a strong tea to reduce fevers. You witness her deep understanding of the seasons, knowing exactly when a plant is most potent, when its life force is at its peak for healing. She knows the cycles of the moon, believing they influence the strength of her harvest, just as they influence the tides and, many believed, the very rhythms of a woman's body. Her basket begins to fill. You see the vibrant red berries of hawthorn, used to strengthen the heart and soothe anxiety, often given as a comforting tea to new mothers. There are sprigs of mugwort, its silvery leaves thought to ease menstrual pain and aid in childbirth, sometimes even to hasten a slow labor. The pungent aroma of garlic wafts from a bundle she has carefully wrapped. Not just a culinary staple, it was a powerful antiseptic, believed to ward off infection and even evil spirits. You observe her reverence for the natural world, a deep connection often misunderstood or demonized by the burgeoning medical establishment of the time. While university-trained male physicians relied on ancient texts, complex theories of humors, and often brutal interventions, the midwife drew her wisdom directly from the living earth, from centuries of empirical observation and handed-down knowledge. Her pharmacy was the forest, her laboratory the hearth. She finds a patch of stinging nettles, and despite their prickles, she carefully gathers them. For nourishment after a long sickness, she might say, boiled and eaten, it gives strength. Or a tea for aching joints. You realize that these aren't just remedies, they are often also sustenance, blurring the lines between food and medicine, a holistic approach deeply rooted in the harsh realities of medieval life. The concept of a sacred grove was not merely poetic for these women. Many of these natural spaces were indeed seen as imbued with spiritual significance, places where the veil between worlds thinned, where one could connect with ancestral spirits or the primal forces of nature. The act of gathering here was itself a spiritual practice, a way of drawing on deeper powers to assist in healing. You might see her harvest willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the precursor to modern aspirin. She would prepare it as a decoction, a strong tea to reduce fevers and alleviate pain. This was not a scientific discovery in the modern sense, but a practical application honed over countless generations of women observing, experimenting, and remembering. The efficacy of such remedies was not always understood, but often, it was undeniable. Consider the strange and sometimes unsettling ingredients that also found their way into the medieval midwife's repertoire. Not all her medicines came from the innocent greenery of the forest floor. Folk beliefs, superstitions, and a desperate search for healing often led to remedies that make a modern person recoil. You might encounter, for example, the use of spiderwebs to staunch bleeding, a practice surprisingly effective due to their natural clotting properties, though undoubtedly unsettling to witness. Or perhaps powdered human bone, a grim ingredient sometimes prescribed for a variety of ailments, believed to transfer the strength of the deceased to the ailing. The lines between medicine, magic, and desperate hope were often blurred, a reflection of a world where disease was rampant, understanding was limited, and life was fragile. She might speak of using the ashes of a burned toad for certain swellings, or the bile of an animal for internal complaints. These practices, born from a blend of observation, animal lore, and sympathetic magic, were part of the tapestry of her craft. The toad, often associated with fertility and transformation in folklore, might have been believed to impart its resilience. The bile, a powerful digestive fluid, might have been seen as a potent cleanser. You follow her to a small hidden spring, its water bubbling up from beneath ancient stones. This is not just water, it is sacred water, believed to possess special healing properties. She fills a small vial, perhaps for mixing with powdered herbs, or for a patient to drink for purification. The power of place, the inherent energy of the earth itself, was as much a part of her medicine as any herb. She might gather moss from a particular north-facing stone, or dew from a specific flower before sunrise. The timing, the location, the specific conditions of harvest were all crucial, imbuing the medicine with additional potency, linking it to the cosmic rhythms and the unseen forces of the world. This meticulous attention to detail was not merely superstition. It was a deep form of empirical observation, however different from our modern scientific method. Back at her humble cottage, you watch her transform these raw materials. Her hands, nimble and practiced, sort and clean. She dries herbs on racks above the hearth, preserving their potency. Roots are ground with a mortar and pestle into fine powders. Leaves are steeped in boiling water to create strong decoctions or infusions. Animal fats are rendered and mixed with herbs to form salves and poultices, soothing balms for tired muscles or inflamed skin. Her kitchen is a small laboratory, filled with the rich, earthy aromas of her craft. You see jars of dried herbs lining the shelves, bundles of roots hanging from the rafters. Each container is carefully labeled, though not with Latin script. Instead, you might see a simple drawing of the plant, or a knot in a string to remind her of its purpose. This is a system of knowledge, passed down orally and through direct apprenticeship, not written in books. When a woman in labor cries out for relief, or a child suffers from a fever, the midwife is ready. She might administer a dose of willow bark tea for the pain, or a soothing compress of comfort for swelling. For a difficult birth, she might prepare a strong infusion of mugwort to stimulate contractions, murmuring ancient incantations as she does so, blending the physical and the spiritual into a single healing act. You might observe her using an amber necklace for teething babies, believing its warmth and perceived magical properties would ease their discomfort. Or placing a small bag of potent herbs, such as rue or vervain, under the pillow of someone suffering from nightmares, to ward off evil influences. These were not just physical interventions, they were acts of care and protection, addressing the spiritual and emotional needs of her patients as well as their bodily complaints. Her medicines were often practical, effective, and deeply intertwined with the folk wisdom of the time. But they were also often viewed with suspicion by the church and by the emerging male medical profession. Her knowledge, derived from nature and passed through generations of women, was seen as primitive, unscientific, or even dangerous. Yet, in the villages and hamlets, it was her hand, guided by the wisdom of the grove, that brought comfort, eased suffering, and often saved lives. You realize that these strange medicines were not random concoctions. They were the culmination of centuries of trial and error, a profound intimacy with the natural world, and a deep understanding of the human body and spirit, all filtered through the lens of medieval belief and necessity. The midwife, with her basket and her wisdom, was a bridge between the wild world and the human village, a keeper of ancient secrets that whispered through the leaves of the sacred grove. The whispers of the sacred grove, the ancient secrets passed down through generations, manifested not just in the midwife's knowing touch, but in the very substances she gathered and prepared. Her remedies were a complex tapestry, woven from plant lore, deep-seated belief, and heartfelt prayer. You stand in the quiet warmth of her cottage, a faint scent of drying herbs and wood smoke clinging to the air, as she demonstrates her craft. Her basket, always near, is a treasure trove of the natural world. You lean closer, catching the sharp, green scent of yarrow, an herb as common as the roadside weeds it resembles, yet imbued with potent powers. This slender plant, she might tell you, staunches bleeding, cools fevers, and even, some believed, could ward off evil spirits. She might steep its leaves in hot water for a tea to calm an agitated stomach, or crush its flowers into a paste for a fresh wound. You observe her hands, calloused and strong as they move with practiced grace. She holds up a handful of dried mugwort, its leaves a dusty silver green. This versatile herb, often associated with women's cycles, might be brewed into a warm drink to ease the pangs of childbirth, or even tucked under a pillow to encourage prophetic dreams. For menstrual discomfort, she would often combine it with pennyroyal, a fragrant, minty herb known for its warming properties. A soothing infusion, she explains, that brings comfort and balance. But the midwife's pharmacopoeia extended beyond the familiar green leaves of the forest and field. You might observe her carefully gathering spiderwebs, delicate filaments destined not for the refuse heap, but for a wound. The silken strands, believed to staunch bleeding, were gently pressed onto cuts, a common practice for centuries. Or perhaps she would meticulously collect snail slime, its viscous trail seen as a potent balm for skin ailments, a natural emollient long before modern dermatologists existed. You might even see her carefully selecting certain types of earth, clays, or mineral-rich muds, which she would mix with herbs and water to create poultices for swelling or drawing out infection. The world, to her, was a living pharmacy. Yet, as vital as these physical ingredients were, the midwife knew that true healing often began in the spirit. You see her hands, not only preparing remedies but also tracing crosses in the air, murmuring ancient prayers. These were not just Christian blessings, though she would invoke saints like Margaret, patroness of childbirth, with fervent devotion. You might hear echoes of older incantations, whispers to the spirits of the earth, requests for aid from forces unseen. Her practice was a profound synthesis of the earthly and the divine. Illness in the medieval world was rarely seen as purely physical. It was often a spiritual affliction, a punishment for sin, or the work of malevolent forces. The midwife, therefore, had to minister to the soul as much as to the body. She might tie a red thread around the wrist of a feverish child, not merely for its perceived medicinal properties, but as a charm against evil influences. You might witness her placing a small piece of blessed bread under a woman's pillow during a difficult labor, blending the sacred with the practical, offering both physical and spiritual sustenance. The lines between medicine and magic, between piety and paganism, were often blurred in her hands. You notice a small, smooth stone she keeps tucked into her pouch, worn smooth from countless touches. Perhaps it is a birthing stone, believed to absorb pain, or a toadstone, thought to draw out poisons. Its power lies not just in its geology, but in the belief imbued within it, the faith of generations who sought solace in its inert form. Similarly, you might see her consulting the phases of the moon before gathering certain herbs, or considering the position of the stars when preparing a particularly potent tonic. The cosmos too had its influence on healing. For persistent aches, she might instruct a patient to apply a poultice of willow bark, the very precursor to modern aspirin, for its fever-reducing and pain-relieving properties. But as you watch her prepare this, you hear her recite a quiet prayer to Saint Blaise, asking for relief from the sufferer's pain. This layering of methods was not seen as contradictory, but rather as complementary. Every avenue to healing was explored, from the tangible to the unseen. When a child suffered from the dreaded rickets, a condition causing soft bones, the midwife might recommend a diet rich in sunlight and certain foods. But she would also prepare a special amulet, perhaps a tiny bag of herbs and blessed salt, to be worn around the child's neck. This dual approach, addressing both the physical symptoms and the perceived spiritual vulnerabilities, was characteristic of her comprehensive care. For a child with a persistent cough, she might offer a spoonful of honey infused with horehound, a bitter but effective herb. and then she would murmur a blessing, asking for the cough to leave the child's body and return to the earth from which it came. Her knowledge was holistic, seeing the patient not as a collection of symptoms, but as an entire being influenced by their body, mind, and spirit, and by the world around them. When someone suffered from melancholy, a common affliction, she might prescribe soothing teas of valerian or chamomile, but also suggest walking in the forest, listening to the birdsong, and praying. She understood the deep connection between mental well-being and physical health long before modern psychology formalized it. The earth, the heavens, and the human heart were all intertwined in her philosophy of healing. You begin to understand that these strange medicines were less about scientific rigor and more about practical observation combined with a deep respect for unseen forces. A mother suffering from insufficient milk might be given a tea of fennel and dill, but also instructed to wear a charm of amber beads, believed to stimulate lactation. The comfort derived from the ritual, the reassurance in the midwife's confident actions, was as much a part of the cure as the herbal properties themselves. The midwife, therefore, operated in a complex and often precarious space. Her profound connection to the natural world, her reliance on ancient remedies, and her blend of Christian devotion with pre-Christian customs made her both revered and, at times, feared. Her practices, though essential to the well-being of the community, stood outside the emerging formal medical structures dominated by men, and often earned her the suspicion of the church. Yet, in the quiet desperation of a birthing room or the throes of a fever, it was her unique blend of potions and prayers, her intimate knowledge of body and spirit, that the people trusted and sought. You step closer, peering over the midwife's shoulder as she stirs a steaming concoction. The air in her small, humble dwelling is thick with the scent of damp earth, dried herbs, and something else, something metallic and faintly animal. While you might associate medieval healing with simple herbal teas and poultices, you soon discover that the midwife's pharmacopoeia extended far beyond the garden gate, reaching into territories that would make even the hardiest modern stomach churn. Consider for a moment the medieval understanding of the body and illness. Sickness was not merely a physical malfunction. It was often seen as an imbalance of humors, a spiritual affliction, or even the work of malevolent spirits. To combat such varied threats, the remedies had to be equally diverse, drawing from every corner of the known world and sometimes from the very edge of human comfort. You watch as she carefully grinds a dried toad. Yes, a toad. Not for a spell, not for a curse, but for medicine. The common toad, its skin toxic to predators, was believed to hold potent healing properties. For example, a dried and powdered toad, perhaps mixed with honey or vinegar, might be applied to a wound to prevent infection or even ingested for certain internal ailments. The logic, in its twisted medieval way, was rooted in a concept called sympathetic magic, where like effects like, or where a creature's perceived properties could be transferred to the patient. Imagine the smell as she prepares a poultice for a patient suffering from a fever. It might contain not just soothing mallow leaves, but also fresh animal dung. Yes, animal excrement, particularly from cows or dogs, was a surprisingly common ingredient in medieval medicine. It was believed to draw out heat or infection, a crude form of counter-irritation or absorbent. You might wrinkle your nose, but to a desperate mother watching her child burn with fever, the midwife's confidence in such a remedy offered a glimmer of hope. The remedies for difficult childbirth were often the most urgent and, to you, the most bizarre. If a woman struggled in labor, the midwife might administer a drink containing powdered mouse or weasel womb, sometimes even the ashes of burned parchment with specific prayers written on them. These were thought to encourage the womb to open, acting as a potent, if repulsive, form of sympathetic aid. You might hear her whisper an incantation as she prepares these, invoking saints or ancient spirits, blending the sacred with the profane in a desperate plea for life. But it was not just animals that contributed to this strange apothecary. The human body itself was seen as a source of potent remedies. You might recoil as the midwife carefully collects a lock of hair from a deceased child, or perhaps a nail clipping. These were not for dark magic in her hands. They were believed to hold curative power, especially for conditions affecting hair or nails, or as protective charms against future illness. The boundaries between medicine, folklore, and what you might call superstition were incredibly fluid, almost non-existent. Consider the remedy for eye ailments, a persistent problem in a world of smoky fires and poor sanitation. You might expect an herbal eye wash, and indeed many were used. But alongside these, you might find remedies involving the bile of a hare, or even the blood of a bat. These substances, believed to possess keen sight or nocturnal vision, were thought to transfer their attributes to the ailing human eye. You can almost feel the sting in your own eyes just imagining such an application. For persistent warts, the midwife might instruct you to rub the wart with a piece of raw meat, then bury the meat under a stone at midnight, believing that as the meat decayed, so too would the wart vanish. Or perhaps she would advise you to touch the wart with a snail, then impale the snail on a thorn bush, again linking the snail's fate to the wart's disappearance. These practices, while not involving ingestion, highlight the deep belief in connection and transference, a hallmark of medieval folk medicine. The use of certain stones and minerals also played a vital role. You might see a small, smooth pebble tied around a child's neck to ward off coughs, or a piece of amber believed to alleviate pain. While some stones were chosen for their perceived magical properties, others might have been valued for their texture or the simple comfort they offered. For example, jet, a form of lignite, was often worn as a protective amulet against various ailments and negative influences. Perhaps one of the most unsettling remedies you encounter involves moss. Not just any moss, but the moss growing on human skulls found in ancient burial grounds. This moss of a dead man's skull was highly prized for its supposed ability to stop bleeding, particularly nosebleeds. It was a macabre ingredient, yes, but in a world without modern antiseptics or clotting agents, every possible avenue for healing was explored, no matter how grisly. You realize that these strange ingredients were not chosen out of malice or ignorance, but from a pragmatic, often desperate, attempt to find solutions in a world where disease was a constant, terrifying companion. The midwife, with her intimate knowledge of the land, its creatures and its forgotten lore, was merely drawing from the vast, often unsettling wellspring of medieval belief. She observed, she experimented, and she passed down remedies through generations, some effective, some harmlessly ritualistic, and some, like powdered toad or human skull moss, truly shocking to modern sensibilities. Her confidence, her steady hands, and her unwavering belief in the efficacy of her methods were themselves powerful medicines. In a time when the causes of illness were mysterious and often attributed to divine displeasure or evil spirits, the midwife offered tangible actions, a sense of agency against the unseen. You might find yourself in a moment of true desperation, accepting a cup with a strange, earthy smell, trusting that her wisdom, however strange its origins, might just save a life. The world of the medieval midwife was one where the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural were blurred, where the physical and the spiritual were inextricably linked. Her medicines, strange as they appear to you now, were a direct reflection of that interconnected worldview, a tapestry woven from plants, animals, human remains, and the very fabric of belief itself. She was a practitioner of a holistic medicine, one that addressed not just the body but the mind and spirit, using whatever means available no matter how unconventional. This journey into her apothecary reveals not just a collection of bizarre ingredients, but a profound insight into the medieval psyche. It shows a people willing to embrace the uncomfortable, even the repugnant, if it promised relief from suffering. You might leave her dwelling with a renewed appreciation for modern medicine, but also with a deeper understanding of the courage, ingenuity, and sometimes terrifying pragmatism of those who healed in a forgotten past. The strange medicines were not just potions, they were potent symbols of survival. These potent symbols of survival, born of necessity and deep traditional knowledge, often walked a treacherous tightrope. In a world steeped in fervent faith and profound fear, the line between healing and hexing was perilously thin. For the medieval midwife, the very acts of her compassion and skill could, with a sudden shift in perspective, become the evidence of a dark pact. Imagine yourself in a small, crowded cottage, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Outside, a storm rages, mirroring the turmoil in the minds of the people who live here. A child lies feverish, writhing on a straw pallet. The local midwife, skilled and experienced, has been called. She bends over the child, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her hands, calloused from years of toil and tender from countless births, prepare a poultice of herbs and a warm infusion. You watch her work, her movements precise, her face etched with a quiet determination. You see her murmur words, perhaps a prayer for healing, perhaps an ancient charm passed down through generations. To you, observing through the lens of modern understanding, she is a healer, doing her best with the tools and knowledge available to her. But step back in time, feel the weight of medieval belief pressing down on you. Hear the whispers that circulate in the village square, in the shadowy corners of the tavern. These whispers speak of strange women who live on the fringes, women who possess knowledge that others do not, women who can influence life and death. The medieval midwife, often an unmarried or widowed woman, lived a life of paradox. She was indispensable, attending every birth, easing suffering, and sometimes performing minor surgeries. Yet, she was also an outsider, her unique position placing her under constant scrutiny. Her very independence, her knowledge of the female body and the secrets of the earth, made her suspect. You might see her gathering herbs under a full moon, a practice rooted in the belief that celestial cycles influence botanical potency. Others might interpret this as a sinister ritual, a communion with dark forces. You might watch her prepare a potion to ease the pains of childbirth, an intricate blend of plant extracts and perhaps even a carefully prepared animal part, like dried toad skin, which was believed to ward off evil during delivery. This could be seen as a magical concoction, a charm rather than a medicine. Consider the act of childbirth itself. It was a perilous journey, often ending in tragedy. When a woman died in labor or her child was stillborn, grief and fear demanded an explanation, a scapegoat. Who better to blame than the woman who presided over the event, the one who claimed to hold the power to ease the passage? The midwife, despite her best efforts, could find herself accused of negligence or worse, of malevolent intent. You can feel the tension in the room after a difficult birth, the unspoken questions in the eyes of the family. Did she do everything she could? Or did she, perhaps, do something else? The Church, a dominant force in medieval life, contributed significantly to this climate of suspicion. As Christianity consolidated its power, it sought to suppress older, pagan practices and beliefs. Many traditional healing methods, intertwined with folklore and animistic worldviews, were rebranded as diabolical. A midwife who used a charm to stop bleeding, or recited a rhyme while administering a herbal remedy, could easily be seen as invoking demons rather than drawing on ancient wisdom. You would hear sermons warning against such practices, painting vivid pictures of eternal damnation for those who dabbled in forbidden arts. The infamous Malleus Maleficarum, or Hammer of Witches, published in the late 15th century, codified these fears. It specifically targeted women, identifying midwives as particularly susceptible to the devil's influence. It argued that midwives, through their access to mothers and infants, could easily commit acts of infanticide or dedicate newborns to Satan. You would see this book, spreading like a plague, fueling the fires of suspicion and providing a chilling blueprint for persecution. Its words, cold and condemning, would echo through the villages, turning neighbor against neighbor, healer against patient. Imagine the midwife's dilemma. She needed to heal, to relieve suffering, to bring new life into the world. Yet, every action she took, every unusual ingredient she used, every old wives' tale she consulted, could be twisted against her. A protective amulet crafted from specific bones or stones, intended to ward off illness, might be condemned as a magical fetish. A potion to encourage fertility, made from potent herbs and perhaps even a ground-up insect or a sliver of human bone, could be seen as an attempt to meddle with God's will. You would hear stories, exaggerated and distorted, of midwives who could cause abortions with dark spells, or who could steal a child's vitality to feed their own malevolent power. These were not just idle tales, they were accusations that could lead to torture, to trial, and to a fiery death. You would feel the prickle of fear when a child suddenly fell ill or a crop failed, and the village elders cast a searching eye towards the woman who healed with herbs and whispers. Her knowledge of women's bodies, of conception and contraception, was particularly threatening. Remedies to prevent unwanted pregnancies, or to encourage a desired one, were viewed with extreme suspicion. Such interventions were seen as attempts to usurp divine authority, to control the sacred process of creation. If a midwife offered a remedy to prevent conception, you could almost hear the accusations forming. She was interfering with God's plan, she was an agent of the devil, preventing souls from entering the world. So, when the midwife presented you with a concoction containing a powdered piece of human bone, or a charm made from a stolen lock of hair, was it wisdom or witchcraft? Was she operating from a deeply practical, if grisly, understanding of what might work in a desperate time? Or was she tapping into a realm of magic and superstition, blurring the lines that separated healer from sorceress? The answer, for many in the Middle Ages, depended entirely on their belief system, their fears, and the outcomes they witnessed. The tragedy of the medieval midwife lies in this constant, harrowing ambiguity. She was a woman of science in an age without scientific method, a practitioner of medicine born from empirical observation and tradition, yet condemned by an emerging worldview that conflated the unknown with the unholy. You can almost feel the weight of that judgment, the pressure to conform, to shy away from anything that might be misinterpreted. Yet, her commitment to alleviating suffering often compelled her to push those boundaries, to use every tool at her disposal, no matter how unconventional. Her strange medicines, then, were not just a reflection of limited medical knowledge. They were also a stark illustration of the perilous social and spiritual landscape she navigated. Every plant she plucked, every animal part she prepared, every incantation she murmured, carried with it the potential for both salvation and damnation. In her hands, the power to heal was always shadowed by the fear of being seen as a witch. You can almost hear the crackle of the fire, the desperate pleas of the accused, the chilling silence of those who dared not speak in her defense. Her story is a testament to the courage of those who sought to heal in a time when understanding was often overridden by superstition, and compassion could be fatally mistaken for malevolence. You step with her now, from the hushed fear of accusation into the bustling reality of her craft, into the heart of her daily labor. You follow her through the dappled light of an early morning, the air still cool and damp, as she makes her way to a patch of overgrown hedgerow, or perhaps deeper into the whispering woods. This is where her strange medicines truly begin, not in a dusty apothecary or a scholar's tome, but in the very earth beneath your feet. Watch as her experienced hands, gnarled and strong, move with purpose. She is not merely plucking leaves or roots, she is conversing with the plants, understanding their cycles, their hidden powers. For every common ailment that plagued the medieval world, fevers that burned through bodies like wildfire, the agonizing pangs of childbirth, the quiet sorrow of a barren woman, the festering sores that refused to heal, she had a remedy, often one steeped in centuries of oral tradition, interwoven with folk belief and raw empirical observation. Consider, for example, the mandrake root. You might picture it shrieking when pulled from the soil, a human-like form imbued with dark magic. And indeed, its use was often accompanied by protective rituals, by the fear of its potent spirit. But in the hands of a skilled midwife, prepared with precision, mandrake could be a powerful narcotic, an anesthetic to dull the searing pain of a difficult delivery, or a sedative to calm a distressed patient. A few drops of its prepared essence might bring a blessed, if temporary, oblivion, allowing a mother to rest, or for a painful procedure to be undertaken. The line between medicine and poison was impossibly thin, and the dosage, often determined by instinct and generations of trial and error, was everything. Too much and a patient might never wake. Too little and the suffering would continue unabated. Then there was the opium poppy, its milky sap a recognized balm for pain long before modern pharmacy. You watch her carefully score the unripe seed pods, collecting the sticky resin. This too was a double-edged sword, offering profound relief but also the insidious grip of addiction. She would prepare a laudanum, perhaps, a tincture dissolved in alcohol, administered in small measured sips to calm a screaming infant with colic, or to ease the relentless ache of chronic illness. You can almost taste the bitter sweetness on your tongue, feel the wave of dullness spread through your limbs. This was not a drug given lightly, but when suffering was absolute, it was a profound mercy. Yet, her pharmacy extended far beyond the readily understood properties of plants. You see her collect spiderwebs not for their delicate beauty, but for their perceived hemostatic qualities, carefully pressing them onto wounds to staunch bleeding, convinced they held the power to bind and heal. You might wrinkle your nose as she instructs a mother to drink a concoction containing the ashes of a burned toad for fertility, or to wear a dried newt around her neck to ward off miscarriage. These were not based on chemical analysis, but on sympathetic magic, on the belief that like affected like, or that creatures of the earth held innate powers that could be harnessed. The toad, a creature of transformation for rebirth. The newt, resilient and mysterious, for protection. Imagine the bedside of a woman in protracted labor. You feel the tension in the air, the collective anxiety. The midwife, having tried simpler herbal infusions to stimulate contractions, might resort to something far more esoteric. Perhaps a potent brew made from ergot, a fungus growing on rye. She knows its power to contract the uterus to push the child forth. But she also knows its danger, its ability to cause convulsions or even death, if misused. The risk was immense, but so was the desire to save both mother and child when all else failed. You see the desperate hope in the eyes of the family, the unwavering resolve in her own. This was the raw edge of medicine, where hope and peril walked hand in hand. Her methods were not just physical, they were profoundly spiritual. You hear her murmur prayers as she applies poultices, invoking saints and blessings alongside the active ingredients. She might tie knots in a cord while speaking ancient words, believing that the knots could bind away illness, or release a child stuck in the birth canal. She might place specific stones under the bed, or hang particular amulets from the rafters, each chosen for its symbolic power to attract good fortune or repel evil. These were not seen as separate from medicine, but as an integral part of healing, addressing the body, mind, and soul in a holistic way. For the medieval mind, sickness was often seen as a spiritual affliction, a punishment, or the work of malevolent forces. Therefore, the cure had to encompass all these dimensions. The knowledge she possessed was hard-won. It was not found in books, for most midwives were illiterate. Instead, it was passed down through generations, whispered from mother to daughter, from elder to apprentice. You see the young girl, perhaps her own daughter, watching her every move, memorizing the shape of a leaf, the texture of a root, the exact moment to harvest, the precise manner to prepare. She learned by doing, by observing countless births, by tending to innumerable ailments. Every success cemented a practice, every failure a hard lesson. This was an empirical science of a different kind, one built on observation and tradition, rather than controlled experiments. She knew the signs of impending danger, the subtle shifts in a woman's breathing, the pallor of her skin, the rhythm of a weakening pulse. When faced with a breech birth, she might, with immense skill and courage, attempt to turn the baby by external manipulation, or even by carefully inserting her hand internally, a procedure fraught with immense risk of infection and trauma in an era without antiseptic practices. You feel the gravity of her responsibility, the sheer physical and mental fortitude required for such tasks, often performed in dimly lit, unhygienic conditions, with only her instincts and experience to guide her. Sometimes her strange medicines involved animal parts, not just for their perceived magical properties, but for more practical, albeit still unproven, applications. Dried wolf's liver, for example, might be ground into a powder and given for jaundice, based on the belief that the strong, vital wolf could impart its strength. Powdered boar's tooth might be used for teething pain, mirroring the animal's powerful tusks. You might find a pouch of dried snake skin under her bed, kept not as a fetish, but as a source of warmth or a charm against skin diseases, believed to aid in renewal. Every part of the natural world was a potential remedy, its efficacy often determined by a blend of ancient wisdom, desperate hope, and the occasional stroke of luck that seemed to validate the strangest of cures. Her work was a constant balancing act between the known and the unknown, the practical and the mystical. You witness her preparing a simple poultice of bread and honey for an infected wound, a remedy that would still be recognized for its antiseptic properties today, side by side with chanting a protection spell over a new mother. Both were equally valid, equally necessary in her holistic approach to healing. She did not differentiate between what we now call science and superstition. For her, they were two sides of the same coin, each offering a pathway to alleviate suffering and restore balance. In the crucible of her practice, where life and death hung by a thread, she was forced to innovate, to adapt, to push the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. Her strange medicines were not the whimsical concoctions of a witch, but the desperate, often ingenious, attempts of a healer operating within the severe limitations of her time. You come to understand that her courage lay not just in facing the social dangers, but in her unwavering commitment to applying every conceivable method, no matter how unconventional or perilous, to save a life, to ease a pain, to bring a new soul into the world. She was the embodiment of pragmatic compassion, her hands a conduit for both ancient wisdom and bold experimentation in a world that desperately needed both. Segment 7. The Bloodroot's Embrace, Ancient Anesthetics and Pain Relief. You understand that in an era before modern medicine, pain was not an abstract concept. It was a constant, gnawing presence in daily life. You need only imagine the simplest cut, the smallest infection, the ache of worn joints from relentless labor, to grasp the sheer suffering that shadowed every existence. Think of a tooth extraction, a broken bone setting, or the prolonged, excruciating ordeal of childbirth. There was no sterile environment, no local anesthetic, no widely available, reliable relief from the screaming agony that could turn an ordinary day into an unending torment. It is here, in the heart of this raw, unyielding reality, that the midwife truly became a sorceress of solace. Her understanding of the natural world, honed over generations, was not just about bringing life forth, but also about easing its inevitable pains. She was an alchemist of comfort, her hands stained with the juices of plants that promised a brief respite, a moment of oblivion, or at least a dulling of the sharp edges of agony. You watch her move, her worn fingers sorting through dried herbs, her nose discerning the subtle sense of potential salvation. Consider the opium poppy. You may picture it as a vibrant flower, its petals a splash of crimson or white, nodding gently in the summer breeze. But in her hands, it transforms into a powerful agent. The milky latex harvested from its unripe seed pods, when dried, becomes opium, a substance known since antiquity for its profound analgesic properties. She might prepare a decoction, a strong tea, for someone racked with a fever or suffering from an agonizing wound. You would witness the slow relaxation of tense muscles, the gradual slackening of a jaw clenched in pain, the eyelids fluttering as sleep, perhaps the first true sleep in days, finally descends. But the poppy, for all its power, was a dangerous ally. Too much, and the sleep could deepen into a fatal slumber, the breath growing shallow until it ceased altogether. It was a fine line, a perilous balance that she, through careful observation and inherited wisdom, learned to walk. You see her measure not with precise scales, but with the intuition born of countless experiences, a spoonful here, a pinch there, a prayer whispered under her breath for guidance. Then there was mandrake, a plant shrouded in folklore and fear. Its root, often resembling a gnarled human figure, was said to shriek when pulled from the earth, a cry that could drive a man mad. Superstition, yes, but also a recognition of its potent, almost supernatural effects. Mandrake contains powerful alkaloids that induce a state of profound sedation and hallucination. When administered carefully, it could render a patient unconscious, making it invaluable for minor surgeries, setting bones, or indeed, easing the pain of a difficult birth. Imagine you are assisting her. She grinds the dried mandrake root into a fine powder, perhaps mixing it with wine or water, creating a draught that would be offered to the suffering individual. You might see the patient's eyes glaze over, their body relax, their cries subsiding into a low moan as they drift into a deep, drug-induced sleep. This was a temporary reprieve from reality, a journey to a dreamscape where pain held no sway. The danger, like with opium, was immense. An overdose could lead to coma and death, underscoring the midwife's critical role as both healer and vigilant guardian against accidental harm. She also understood the power of henbane, another plant in the Solanaceae family, cousin to the mandrake. Its leaves and seeds, when prepared as a tincture or an infusion, offered a similar pathway to pain relief and sedation. Henbane's effects were less dramatic than mandrake's, often producing a dreamy state, relieving muscle spasms and dulling nerve pain. It might be used for someone suffering from chronic pain, perhaps the persistent ache of rheumatism or the gripping spasms of internal ailments. You would witness the subtle shift in their demeanor, a loosening of their grip on distress, a faint smile perhaps playing on their lips as the plant's gentle embrace took hold. Perhaps one of the most ingenious methods of medieval anesthesia was the sleeping sponge. This was not a plant in itself, but a delivery system, a culmination of her pharmaceutical knowledge. You might watch her prepare one. A natural sponge would be steeped in a potent mixture of the juices of mandrake, opium, henbane, and sometimes hemlock or deadly nightshade. Once thoroughly saturated and dried, these sponges could be kept and used when needed. When required, the sponge would be re-moistened and held to the patient's nose and mouth, allowing them to inhale the vapors of these powerful narcotics. You would see the patient, perhaps a man with a festering wound requiring lancing, or a woman suffering from the profound pain of a miscarriage, inhale deeply. Slowly, the strong odors would permeate their senses, and the potent compounds would begin their work. Their breathing would deepen, their eyelids would droop, and soon they would drift into a state of semi-consciousness, their body numb to the pain, their mind adrift from the present horror. This allowed the midwife, or a barber surgeon if one was present, to perform necessary, albeit crude, procedures with less resistance and agonizing cries from the patient. And what of the bloodroot, the plant referenced in our very title? This striking perennial, with its white flowers and distinctive red sap, was indeed part of her pharmacopoeia, especially in the Americas where indigenous peoples had long recognized its medicinal properties. While primarily known for its emetic and expectorant qualities, and used in traditional remedies for skin conditions and respiratory issues, certain preparations were also employed as a sedative and analgesic. The red sap, a powerful alkaloid-rich substance, could be applied topically for pain relief, or prepared in very diluted forms for internal use, though its extreme potency required exceptional caution. You might see her carefully extract the sap, its crimson hue staining her fingers, a stark reminder of the plant's potent nature. Applied as a poultice, perhaps to a swollen joint or a painful lesion, it offered a different kind of relief, a topical numbing that might not plunge you into slumber, but would certainly soothe the localized torment. Her knowledge of bloodroot, whether learned from indigenous healers or through her own experimentation with plants brought from afar, highlights her broad and adaptive approach to healing. Beyond these more dramatic anesthetics, she also employed simpler, yet effective, pain relievers. Willow bark, for example, contains salicin, a compound similar to modern aspirin. You might watch her strip the bark, boil it, and offer the bitter tea to someone suffering from a headache, fever, or inflammatory pain. It was a gentler remedy, but one that offered genuine, if less immediate, comfort. Cannabis, too, was known in some medieval texts for its analgesic and anti-inflammatory properties, potentially offered as an infusion or a topical application. Alcohol in its various forms was also a common tool. A strong draught of wine or ale, while not a true anesthetic, could dull the senses, loosen inhibitions, and provide a temporary escape from physical pain and emotional distress. It was a crude but readily available option, often used in conjunction with other herbal remedies to enhance their sedative effects or simply to help the patient cope. You come to appreciate that her skill was not just in knowing which plant to use, but how to prepare it, in what dosage, and for whom. Every person was different, every body reacted uniquely. She was a keen observer, learning from each success and each failure, constantly refining her art. Her laboratory was the forest, the field, and her own small garden patch, brimming with life and death, healing and harm. In a world devoid of sterile environments, modern pharmaceuticals, or understanding of germ theory, the midwife's ability to offer pain relief was nothing short of miraculous. She operated on the very edge of knowledge, guided by empirical evidence and a deep, empathetic connection to the suffering of others. You witness her quiet determination, her steady hands, her compassionate gaze as she administers a sleeping draught, applies a poultice, or simply holds a hand. Her strange medicines then were not just remedies, they were acts of profound courage and innovation. They represented a defiant stand against the relentless agony of existence, a testament to the enduring human need for comfort and solace. She was not just healing bodies, she was soothing souls, offering dignity in the face of suffering, and granting a brief, precious reprieve from a world saturated with pain. You recognize that her strange medicines were, in fact, humanity's earliest attempts to conquer one of its most ancient and formidable foes, the relentless grip of pain. And in her hands, these potent plants became instruments of grace. Beyond the quiet grace of pain relief, her world of medicine extended into realms that would shock and mystify modern sensibilities. You are now invited deeper into the secrets of her satchel, into the earthen jars and dried bundles that line her modest shelves. Here, the subtle art of healing intertwines with the ancient whispers of the earth itself, and sometimes with beliefs that hover on the edge of the mystical. You lean closer, inhaling the mingled scents of dried herbs, beeswax, and something faintly earthy, almost metallic. This is her apothecary, a testament to centuries of trial and error, a library of nature's remedies passed from mother to daughter, from elder to apprentice. Each ingredient has a story, a specific purpose in the intricate tapestry of human health and suffering. Consider the common mallow, its gentle leaves and flowers used to soothe inflamed skin or calm a restless stomach. You might see bundles of yarrow, known for its ability to staunch bleeding, a vital tool in the aftermath of a difficult birth. Then there is shepherd's purse, another powerful herb for hemorrhage, often brewed into a tea, its effects understood through generations of observation, long before anyone conceived of its chemical compounds. But her remedies stretch beyond the simply practical. You notice a small, carefully wrapped bundle of mugwort, a plant steeped in lore and power. It is said to aid in childbirth, to ease menstrual pain, and even to ward off evil spirits. For the midwife, these two aspects are not separate. A woman's health is not merely a physical state, it is deeply entwined with her emotional and spiritual well-being. So, a potion of mugwort might be administered with a murmured prayer, or a sprig might be placed beneath a laboring woman's bed, offering both physical and psychological comfort. You recognize that the placebo effect, though unnamed, was a powerful ally. Her strange medicines also include powerful, even dangerous, ingredients. You might glimpse small quantities of ergot, a fungus that grows on rye. In minute, carefully measured doses, ergot was known to stimulate uterine contractions, useful for accelerating a slow labor or expelling the placenta. Yet even a slight miscalculation could be catastrophic, leading to convulsions, gangrene, or death. This is where her accumulated wisdom, her innate understanding of dosage and the individual patient, became paramount. She walked a precarious tightrope between healing and harm, guided by an empirical knowledge few men of medicine possessed. You observe her preparing a remedy. She grinds dried poppy seeds in a stone mortar, releasing their potent narcotic properties. This is not for a general ache, but for truly agonizing pain, perhaps a woman suffering from cancer or the relentless throes of a stone. She might mix it with honey, or brew it into a dark, viscous syrup. The risk of addiction is not fully understood, but the immediate need for relief often outweighs distant concerns. Her treatments for infertility are equally fascinating and often rooted in both observation and folklore. You might see her preparing a decoction of lady's mantle, a plant believed to strengthen the womb and promote fertility. Or perhaps she applies a poultice of crushed herbs to a woman's abdomen, combined with specific rituals or prayers directed at saints known for their patronage of women and childbirth. The despair of childlessness was profound in this era, and the midwife offered hope, even if her methods were sometimes more spiritual than strictly scientific. You learn that animal parts sometimes found their way into her cures. A broth made from a freshly killed hare might be given to a woman struggling with menstruation, the animal's fertility symbolically transferred. Or perhaps a piece of amber, believed to possess healing energies, might be worn as an amulet. These are not always rational choices by modern standards, but in a world where the lines between science, magic, and religion were blurred, every avenue for healing was explored. Consider the role of fumigations. For certain ailments, especially those of the female reproductive system thought to be caused by wandering wombs or bad humors, she might instruct a woman to sit over a steaming pot of herbs, the fragrant vapors intended to purify, cleanse, or draw out disease. These could be practical, for example, soothing inflamed tissues with warm, moist air and herbal essences. But they also tapped into ancient beliefs about air, scent, and internal balance. Her strange medicines also tackled skin complaints, a constant problem in a world without modern hygiene. You might see her mixing a salve from beeswax, olive oil, and various herbs like comfrey or plantain to heal wounds and reduce inflammation. For skin eruptions or infections, she might apply a dressing soaked in a solution of fermented herbs, relying on the antiseptic properties of the plants, or even the mild acidity of the fermentation. You watch her prepare a birth control remedy, a controversial and often secretive practice. While crude by today's standards, medieval midwives possessed knowledge of plants believed to prevent conception or induce early miscarriage. Pennyroyal, for instance, a potent herb, was used for these purposes. These methods were dangerous and often ineffective, yet they underscore the constant demand for control over one's body and destiny, even in the face of profound societal and religious strictures. The risks were immense, both physical and legal, yet the need was greater. Her knowledge was not static. It evolved through direct observation and shared experience. She learned from every birth, every illness, every death. She understood that each body was unique, responding differently to remedies. This empirical approach, though lacking formal scientific structure, made her a keen observer of human physiology and pathology. She was a living database of medical knowledge, her mind a repository of successes and failures. You are struck by the immense courage required for her work. She faced skepticism, suspicion, and often outright hostility from the established church and emerging male physicians. Her practices, deeply rooted in women's folk traditions, were often demonized as witchcraft. Yet she persisted, driven by an unwavering commitment to the women she served. Her strange medicines were not just a collection of plants and rituals. They were a lifeline for countless women, offering comfort, hope, and often, survival. Her laboratory was not a sterile chamber, but a cottage filled with the rich, earthy smells of her craft. Her tools were not gleaming instruments, but simple pestles, mortars, ceramic pots, and the gentle strength of her own hands. In her care, even the most mundane plant became a potent instrument of healing. You recognize that these strange medicines, born of necessity and passed down through generations, were the very foundation of medicine, a testament to humanity's enduring quest to alleviate suffering and sustain life in the most challenging of times. Her practices were a complex blend of empiricism, tradition, and compassion, forged in the crucible of daily struggle and relentless human need. Yet, among the daily struggles and relentless human need, there existed another profound challenge, one whispered in hushed tones behind closed doors. You stand beside the midwife, watching her tend to a woman recovering from a difficult birth, and you realize that for every child welcomed into the world, there were others who were not wanted, or for whom arrival meant only greater hardship. The tapestry of life in the Dark Ages was fragile, stretched taut by famine, disease, and the ever-present threat of war. For a woman, another mouth to feed could mean the difference between survival and starvation for her existing family. A pregnancy born of violence or one that threatened her own life presented an agonizing dilemma. You understand that the medieval midwife, the wise woman of the village, was not only a bringer of life but also, at times, a gatekeeper of it. Her knowledge, inherited through generations, extended beyond safe delivery to the prevention and termination of pregnancy. These were not matters openly discussed, certainly not celebrated, but they were realities she confronted with a quiet determination, driven by the desperate pleas of women who had nowhere else to turn. Imagine the sheer physical burden of constant childbearing. You see women around you who have given birth 8, 10, 12 times, their bodies worn, their strength depleted. Each pregnancy carried an immense risk of death, both for mother and child. Infant mortality rates were shockingly high. Perhaps only half of all children born would survive to adulthood. This stark reality made the choice to prevent or end a pregnancy not one of convenience, but often one of survival, a grim calculation in a brutal world. What did prevention look like in an era devoid of modern medicine? You learn that contraception as we understand it was largely a hopeful endeavor, a blend of folk wisdom, herbal lore, and sometimes outright magical thinking. The midwife knew plants that were believed to induce menstruation, or to act as abortifacients if taken at critical times. These were not always precise, nor were they without danger. You hear her speak of ingredients like pennyroyal, a fragrant mint often used in teas, believed to bring on delayed periods. Rue, a bitter herb, was another. Savon, a juniper-like plant, was known for its powerful properties. These were often administered in small doses, perhaps as a preventative measure if conception was suspected but not confirmed, or if a woman simply wished to avoid pregnancy after intercourse. You watch her carefully measure dried leaves, knowing that the line between a therapeutic dose and a toxic one was perilously thin, a knowledge she held with great responsibility. Beyond herbs, you encounter other methods, some more symbolic than scientific. Pessaries, small plugs inserted into the vagina, were sometimes concocted from substances like beeswax, honey, or even crocodile dung, though the latter was likely a relic of ancient Egyptian texts rather than common medieval practice. You might find women attempting to block conception with charms, or by performing certain rituals after intercourse, hoping to shake out the seed. The belief in sympathetic magic was strong. If you wanted to prevent life, perhaps you consumed barren plants, or carried stones thought to possess infertile properties. Yet, despite these attempts at prevention, pregnancies still occurred where they were not wanted, where they posed an existential threat. And so, the midwife was also called upon for the most desperate of measures: abortion. You understand that the moral landscape around abortion in the Dark Ages was far more complex than popular understanding often suggests. While the Church condemned it, particularly once the fetus was quickened or ensouled, definitions of when that occurred varied. Early in pregnancy, before quickening, the moment a woman felt the fetus move, some theologians viewed it differently, sometimes as an expulsion of unformed matter rather than a homicide. This nuance, however, offered little comfort to a woman in distress. You see the fear in their eyes, the quiet desperation when they come to the midwife. They risk not only their lives but also social ostracization, and perhaps even legal punishment, though laws were often inconsistently applied and difficult to enforce in secret. The midwife, in turn, risked her reputation, her freedom, and even her life by engaging in such practices. Her methods for inducing abortion were often harsh and dangerous. You witness her preparing strong decoctions of powerful herbs. Tansy, known for its bitter taste and uterine stimulant properties. Ergot, a fungus that grows on rye, which in controlled doses could induce powerful contractions but was also a potent poison, causing convulsions and gangrene, or stronger concentrations of the aforementioned pennyroyal, rue, and savon. The administration of these was a delicate dance between necessity and near-fatal toxicity. Beyond herbs, physical methods were sometimes employed. You hear whispers of vigorous massage of the abdomen, prolonged hot baths, or even attempts to induce miscarriage through strenuous physical labor or falls. These were crude, often brutal, and incredibly dangerous. The risk of hemorrhage, infection, and irreparable damage to the woman's body, or even her death, was ever present. You are struck by the immense courage and trust required of both the woman seeking help and the midwife providing it. This was not a medical procedure performed in a sterile environment with a clear understanding of anatomy and pharmacology. This was a desperate act, undertaken in secrecy, often with only candlelight and a prayer. The midwife's hands, so gentle in delivering a child, could also be the instrument of its early cessation, a heavy burden she carried with solemn grace. These strange medicines, the very same plants and preparations used to ease menstrual pains, to promote fertility, or to heal other ailments, became tools for ending a pregnancy. You witnessed the duality of her craft, the healing power and the destructive potential residing within the same natural remedies. The knowledge of these plants was a double-edged sword, a testament to the raw, untamed power of nature that she sought to harness. For the medieval midwife, the decision to help a woman terminate a pregnancy was never taken lightly. It was born of deep empathy and a pragmatic understanding of the harsh realities of life. She knew the suffering that an unwanted child could bring to a family already at its breaking point, or the plight of a woman who simply could not survive another birth. You see her as a woman who transcended the rigid moral strictures of her time, driven instead by a profound commitment to the well-being of the women in her community. Her cottage, which felt like a sanctuary of healing, now also feels like a repository of secrets, of difficult choices made in the shadows. You begin to grasp the full scope of her role, a healer, a protector, a confessor, and sometimes a reluctant arbiter of life and death. Her presence offered not judgment, but a desperate chance for control in a world where women had so little of it. In these hidden practices, you discover another facet of the medieval midwife's enduring legacy. Her unwavering advocacy for women, even when it meant walking a path fraught with danger and moral ambiguity, navigating the uncharted waters of human need with nothing but her knowledge, her courage, and her strange, potent medicines. You step closer to the worn wooden table, where an array of dried herbs and curious objects hints at the true nature of these potent preparations. The air in her cottage carries the lingering scent of many things: wood smoke, dried lavender, and something sharp and earthy, perhaps a root recently crushed. This is not just a collection of folk remedies, it is a meticulously assembled pharmacopoeia, guided by generations of wisdom, trial and error, and a deep understanding of the natural world, albeit filtered through a medieval lens. Look closely at the jars and pouches. Here you see familiar plants, chamomile for its calming properties, perhaps steeped as a tea for anxious mothers. Willow bark, recognized even then for its ability to ease pain, an ancient aspirin for the aches of labor or postpartum recovery. Mugwort, a plant often associated with feminine health, believed to promote menstruation and assist in difficult births, its leaves bundled and dried. These are the straightforward medicines, the ones whose actions we can, in some measure, understand even today. But then your gaze drifts to less conventional ingredients. A small, dark vial might contain a tincture of pennyroyal, a powerful herb known for its ability to induce menstruation. In the right hands and in carefully measured doses, it could be used to regulate cycles or, more controversially, to terminate an early pregnancy. The knowledge of such potent substances was a closely guarded secret, passed from midwife to apprentice, a tool of immense power and risk. Nearby, a small, gnarled root carefully wrapped. This could be mandrake, a plant steeped in folklore and fear. Its bifurcated root was thought to resemble a human form, lending it an almost magical potency. In small doses, mandrake could act as a powerful sedative, offering temporary relief from the agonizing pains of childbirth or even aiding in rudimentary surgical procedures by inducing a deep, dreamlike sleep. But too much and it was a deadly poison. The line between healer and harm was incredibly fine, navigated with a skill born of long experience and a profound respect for the plants themselves. You might also find dried ergot, a fungus that grows on rye and other grains. This was a truly double-edged sword. In minuscule, controlled amounts, ergot contains compounds that cause strong uterine contractions. A midwife might use it to hasten a stalled labor or to expel the placenta after birth, preventing dangerous hemorrhages. Yet, in larger quantities or if contaminated, ergot caused devastating convulsions, hallucinations, and gangrene, leading to the condition known as St. Anthony's fire. The medieval midwife walked a tightrope, balancing potential salvation with the very real threat of catastrophe. Her judgment, her keen observation of the woman in labor, was paramount. Beyond the plant kingdom, the midwife's strange medicines ventured into the animal world, reflecting a belief system where the properties of creatures could be transferred to humans. You might see a dried toad, perhaps crushed and applied as a poultice for swelling or infections, a practice rooted in the idea that cold-blooded creatures could draw out heat and fever. Pigeon blood, collected fresh, might be mixed with herbs and used to staunch bleeding, an attempt to replace lost vitality with a similar life force. The liver of a wolf, powdered and ingested, was thought to impart strength and courage, qualities desperately needed during a prolonged and terrifying labor. These were not simply superstitions. They were practical applications of a worldview that saw the interconnectedness of all living things, where observed traits could be harnessed for healing. Consider the role of sympathetic magic in these preparations. If a woman struggled with infertility, for example, a midwife might prescribe a fertility charm made from the reproductive organs of a prolific animal, hoping to transfer that animal's fecundity. If a baby was slow to emerge, a midwife might use an object that symbolized speed or ease of passage, combined with prayers and incantations. These practices were woven into the fabric of daily life, not seen as distinct from the herbal remedies, but as complementary tools in the holistic approach to healing. Minerals, too, held their place in this apothecary. Salt, a common and vital preservative, was also revered for its purifying properties, used in washes and baths to cleanse wounds or ward off infection. Certain clays and earths might be applied as soothing plasters. While the more toxic minerals like lead or mercury were generally handled by alchemists or physicians for other ailments, the midwife often dealt with preparations that included naturally occurring mineral compounds, chosen for their perceived effects on the body. The preparation of these medicines was an art in itself, demanding precision and patience. You observe a mortar and pestle worn smooth from centuries of grinding roots, leaves and animal parts into fine powders. You might see stills for distilling spirits, creating potent tinctures where the medicinal properties of plants were concentrated in alcohol. There are clay pots for brewing decoctions, simmering herbs for hours to extract their essence. Ointments and salves were painstakingly rendered from animal fats, beeswax and infused oils, then mixed with powdered herbs to create topical remedies for sores, rashes or chapped skin. Each preparation was not just a chemical process. It was often accompanied by prayers, blessings or specific rituals, imbuing the medicine with spiritual power. The midwife understood that healing encompassed not just the body, but also the mind and spirit. A worried mother might be given a calming herbal tea, but also a whispered incantation or a blessed amulet to ease her fears. This holistic approach, blending the physical with the spiritual, was central to her practice. Think about the sheer knowledge required to navigate this landscape of remedies. The midwife had to identify hundreds of plants, knowing not only their common names, but their seasons for harvesting, the optimal parts to use, root, leaf, flower, seed, and the specific conditions they treated. She had to differentiate between beneficial herbs and their poisonous lookalikes. She needed to understand how different ingredients interacted, how to combine them for maximum effect, and how to counteract potential side effects. This was an empirical science refined over countless generations, based on direct observation and meticulous record-keeping, often in oral traditions or simple, coded notebooks. Her expertise extended to the various methods of administration. Some medicines were brewed as teas, meant for internal consumption. Others were applied externally as poultices or compresses, drawing out infection or reducing swelling. Pessaries, small medicinal suppositories inserted vaginally, were used for specific gynecological issues or to induce labor. Fumigations, where aromatic herbs were burned and their smoke inhaled or directed towards a patient, were believed to cleanse the air, alleviate respiratory problems, or even influence reproductive health. Each delivery method was chosen carefully, tailored to the specific ailment and the individual woman. These strange medicines were, by necessity, a mix of the truly effective, the placebo, and the potentially dangerous. In an era without modern pharmacology, where the mechanisms of disease were poorly understood, midwives relied on what they had: a profound connection to nature, an inherited body of knowledge, and an unwavering commitment to alleviate suffering. They were healers operating on the very edge of what was known, pushing the boundaries of survival with every carefully chosen leaf, every ground root, every whispered prayer. You begin to appreciate the immense responsibility resting on her shoulders. Every dosage, every combination, every treatment carried a weight of consequence. There were no laboratories for testing, no pharmaceutical companies to guarantee purity or efficacy. Her patients were often desperate, with little other recourse. The trust placed in her was absolute, and she, in turn, placed her trust in the ancient wisdom of the plants and animals, and in her own sharpened instincts. Her medicines were not always pleasant to the taste or appealing to the eye. They were often bitter, pungent, or made from materials that would make a modern person recoil. Yet they offered hope. They provided tangible actions in the face of helplessness. They embodied the desperate ingenuity of an age that understood healing as a deeply personal, often dangerous, negotiation with the forces of nature and the mysteries of the human body. In this hidden realm of strange and potent medicines, you see the medieval midwife not just as a birth attendant, but as a master alchemist of the natural world, transforming raw materials into remedies, sometimes miraculous, sometimes tragic, but always born of a fierce dedication to her community. Her cottage, filled with these silent witnesses to her craft, hums with the echoes of both efficacy and desperation, a testament to the enduring human quest for healing. She was a practitioner of a medicine that blended science, folklore, and faith, a medicine designed not just to cure, but to comfort, to support, and ultimately, to offer a fighting chance in a world where life was often fragile and fleeting. You stand now at the threshold of life itself, in a room that smells of sweat and fear, herbs and hope. Here, in the flickering light of a medieval dwelling, the drama of childbirth unfolds, a perilous journey for both mother and child. This was not merely a physical event, it was a cosmic struggle, a negotiation between mortal fragility and the relentless forces of nature. Every birth was a gamble, the odds often stacked against a safe passage. Maternal mortality was agonizingly high, infant death a common heartbreak. In this intense crucible of creation, the medieval midwife was not just present, she was the central figure, a beacon of knowledge and resilience. You watch her, her face etched with experience, her hands both gentle and firm. Her cottage might be filled with remedies for various ailments, but none were more critical, more urgently sought, than those designed to aid in the delivery of new life. Her toolkit was not surgical steel, but a blend of centuries of empirical observation, inherited wisdom, and a deep understanding of local flora. She was an expert in the language of the body and the whispers of the earth. When labor began, the midwife's first goal was often to encourage its progress, to ease the intense, rhythmic contractions that pushed life into the world. You might see her brewing a potent concoction of pennyroyal, a herb known for its stimulating properties, believed to bring on or strengthen contractions. It was administered as a warm tea, its sharp, minty aroma filling the air, a scent of urgency and purpose. Or perhaps she would turn to mugwort, another powerful herb, steeped in folklore and medicinal belief. Mugwort was not only thought to aid contractions but also to protect the mother from evil spirits, an ever-present concern in a world where unseen forces were blamed for misfortune. She understood the importance of comfort and support. You might witness her preparing a warm bath infused with soothing herbs like chamomile or lavender, not just for hygiene, but for the relaxation it offered the laboring woman. The gentle warmth could ease muscle tension, providing a momentary respite from the relentless pain. Poultices, warm compresses made from flaxseed or bran, were applied to the lower back and abdomen, their heat intended to relax the muscles and draw out discomfort. She guided the birthing mother through different positions, encouraging movement, recognizing that gravity and specific stances could assist in the baby's descent. You hear her soft murmurs of encouragement, her steady presence an anchor in the storm of pain. But what of the pain itself? While modern analgesia was centuries away, the medieval midwife was not without strategies to lessen suffering. Though dangerous and rarely given in full doses, ingredients like the opium poppy might have been sparingly used in very specific, desperate circumstances, more for extreme medical conditions than routine childbirth due to its high toxicity. Instead, she primarily relied on less potent but still effective methods. Strong-smelling salts or vinegars were held to the nose to ward off faintness. Distracting the mother with prayers, stories, or simple rhythmic breathing exercises was a common technique. You see her massaging the mother's temples with an herbal oil, or offering sips of a weak wine infused with calming herbs, hoping to dull the sharpest edges of agony without imperiling the process. The psychological comfort she offered, the reassurance that she was there, a knowledgeable and caring presence, was arguably one of her most potent forms of pain relief. Beyond the physical, the spiritual realm was inextricably woven into every aspect of medieval life, especially childbirth. You might notice an amulet placed near the birthing bed, perhaps a piece of coral or jet, believed to absorb negative energies and protect against malevolent forces. Charms inscribed with prayers or saints' names, particularly those associated with childbirth like Saint Margaret or Saint Anne, were common. Sometimes an eagle stone, a hollow stone said to rattle when shaken, was tied to the thigh or placed beneath the birthing bed. Folklore held that this stone would prevent miscarriage and ensure an easy delivery. While modern science dismisses their direct medical effect, these items provided immense psychological solace, a sense of protection and divine intervention in a situation that felt overwhelmingly out of human control. They were anchors of faith in a sea of uncertainty. If labor proved stubbornly slow or stalled, the midwife would turn to more assertive remedies. You might see her prepare a decoction of savory or parsley, herbs believed to have strong emmenagogic properties, stimulating blood flow and encouraging uterine contractions. Rue, a powerful and often dangerous herb, was sometimes used with extreme caution to induce menstruation or labor, though its toxicity meant it was employed only in dire circumstances by the most experienced practitioners. She might even resort to fumigations, burning certain herbs like juniper or frankincense near the birthing mother, believing the smoke would have a physiological effect or drive away evil spirits hindering the birth. These were desperate measures for desperate times. The moment of birth, the triumphant arrival of a new soul, was not the end of the midwife's duties. Her care extended into the crucial postpartum period for both mother and infant. You observe her attending to the expulsion of the placenta, a critical step to prevent hemorrhage. Remedies to staunch bleeding were paramount. Shepherd's purse, a common weed, was highly valued for its astringent properties, often brewed into a strong tea. Nettles, too, were used for their ability to promote clotting and enrich the blood. For the new mother, she had remedies to encourage milk flow, vital for the baby's survival. Fenugreek, with its distinctive maple-like aroma, was a popular choice, often consumed as a tea or added to food. Dill and anise were also employed to stimulate lactation. To aid in the mother's physical recovery, promoting healing of any tears or wounds, comfrey, known as knit bone for its healing properties, was applied as a poultice or infused into washes. Vaginal steams, using herbs like yarrow or raspberry leaves, were thought to cleanse and soothe. The newborn also received her meticulous attention. The cutting and tying of the umbilical cord was a sacred act, and she possessed a variety of salves and powders, often herbal, to prevent infection. A common practice involved applying a paste of honey and salt, or powdered herbs like myrrh or frankincense, known for their antiseptic qualities. Swaddling the infant, a practice both for warmth and a sense of security, was done with practiced hands. You see her gently examining the baby, looking for any signs of trouble, her eyes missing nothing. This intricate tapestry of remedies, rituals, and practical skills was not haphazard. It was a sophisticated system, albeit one that integrated what we now separate as science and superstition. For the medieval midwife, the physical and the spiritual were two sides of the same coin. A stubborn birth could be due to a malposition of the baby or the interference of a malevolent spirit. Her response addressed both possibilities simultaneously. She operated within a worldview where the visible and invisible worlds constantly intersected. The strange medicines of these medieval midwives, sometimes seemingly bizarre to modern sensibilities, were born of necessity, observation, and a profound commitment to life. They represent a fierce, inventive spirit in the face of immense medical challenges. You understand that each herb, each charm, each gesture was a thread in the lifeline she cast to mothers and babies, an offering of all the knowledge, courage, and hope she possessed. Her work was a daily testament to the enduring human struggle for survival and the timeless, sacred act of bringing new life into the world. Her wisdom, passed down through generations, shaped the very fabric of communities, one miraculous, fragile birth at a time. That wisdom, inherited and honed, manifested in a fascinating collection of remedies and rituals, each imbued with purpose and often deep symbolic meaning. You stand in her small, humble dwelling, perhaps by the hearth where a pot simmers gently, releasing a pungent steam. The air itself feels thick with history, with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and the faint, earthy aroma of the midwife's well-worn hands. You see her reaching for a small woven basket, filled with bundles of plants, each one carefully selected, each one carrying a story, a purpose. Her herbal pharmacy was a living, breathing testament to the natural world around her. She understood the land not through scientific classification, but through generations of intimate observation and communal memory. You watch her pick up a dried bunch of mugwort, its leaves silvery green, almost mystic in their appearance. She knows it for its power to bring on delayed menses, and thus, in her reasoning, perhaps to quicken a sluggish birth. She might brew it into a strong infusion, urging the laboring mother to sip it, its bitter, earthy taste a small discomfort in the face of the larger struggle. Or perhaps she guides the mother to inhale its steam, hoping its essence would penetrate deeply, coaxing the reluctant child into the world. Then there is vervain, another herb you recognize, not just for its physical properties, but for its deep associations with ancient magic and protection. The midwife might crush its leaves, mixing them with a little water or honey, applying the paste to the mother's belly to ease the pain of contractions, or to ward off ill spirits she believes might be hindering the birth. You feel the weight of tradition in her every gesture, a silent acknowledgement of powers beyond simple chemistry. For postpartum care, you see her turning to different allies. Raspberry leaf, its delicate, serrated edges belying its strength, is a trusted friend. She knows it strengthens the womb, helps it to contract back to its size, and stems the flow of blood after the baby has arrived. You hear her describe how it was given throughout the later stages of pregnancy, a gentle preparation for the immense physical challenge ahead. For excessive bleeding, a fearful complication, she might turn to yarrow, its tiny white flowers packed tightly in flat-topped clusters. Its astringent qualities are well known to her, used to staunch wounds and stem internal flows, a vital intervention when every drop of blood was precious. But her medicines extend far beyond the botanical. The strange medicines also encompass the realm of sympathetic magic, where effects like an intention holds potent power. You might observe her carefully unlatching every door and window in the birthing room, even untying every knot in the mother's clothing and loosening her hair. These are not idle actions. She believes that these acts of opening would help open the birth canal, physically mirroring the desired physiological process. You feel the tension in the room ease slightly as she performs these small, hopeful rituals, a collective sigh of belief reinforcing the action. You hear her murmur ancient phrases, not just prayers to the saints, but incantations, weaving a protective linguistic shield around the fragile new life and the weary mother. These words, often passed down in hushed tones from her own mother and grandmother, are imbued with centuries of collective hope and fear. They might invoke protective spirits, banish malevolent forces, or simply offer comfort and courage to the woman in her charge. The sound of her voice, steady and rhythmic, becomes another form of medicine, a balm to frayed nerves, a focus for waning strength. Specific objects also become conduits for healing and assistance. You might see her place a small, smooth stone, perhaps one she has carried for years, beneath the birthing bed. This stone, worn by time and imbued with intention, is believed to ease the passage, to absorb pain, or to offer grounding strength. Or perhaps a piece of amber, warmed by her hand, is held against the mother's skin, its perceived mystical properties believed to soothe and protect. These are not merely superstitions to her. They are practical tools, understood and applied within a worldview where the physical and spiritual were not separate, but deeply intertwined. Consider the remedies for a baby struggling to thrive. You witness her performing a ritual known as passing the child through, where the infant is gently passed back and forth through a cleft in a tree, or even through the legs of a healthy horse or cow. This is done not out of cruelty, but from a profound belief that the vitality of the strong living thing would be transferred to the weak infant, a desperate attempt to imbue life where it seemed to falter. The midwife, in such moments, acts not just as a healer, but as a mediator between the human world and the powerful, mysterious forces of nature. The strange medicines also include what we might consider today as psychological interventions, though she would not have named them as such. Her unwavering presence, her calm demeanor, her experienced touch, all contribute to the mother's sense of safety and confidence. You feel her steady hand on the mother's brow, hear her gentle words of encouragement, witness her tireless energy. This constant support, the reassurance that she is not alone, that help is at hand, is perhaps one of the most potent medicines she possesses. Her medicines extended to the very environment. You might see her carefully stoking the fire, ensuring the birthing room is warm, knowing that warmth helps relax muscles and encourages blood flow. She might offer a warm bath or a steaming herbal poultice to apply to the lower back, providing physical comfort and relief from pain. These interventions, simple yet profound, are rooted in an intuitive understanding of the body's needs during labor. Hydration too is key. She offers sips of broth, water, or weak herbal teas, understanding that sustained effort requires sustenance, though she might attribute the energy boost to the spiritual qualities of the ingredients rather than just their nutritional value. You begin to understand that the term strange is a judgment born of a different time, a different understanding of the universe. To the medieval midwife, every plant, every spoken word, every ritual gesture was a logical, necessary tool in her fight for life. Her knowledge was empirical, gathered over generations of trial and error, observation and transmission. She saw the connections between the visible effect of an herb and its subtle, unseen influence. She believed in the power of intention, the force of collective faith, and the profound impact of symbolic action. Her methods were a tapestry woven from strands of practical experience, inherited lore, and deeply held spiritual beliefs. You realize that to dismiss her strange medicines as mere superstition is to misunderstand the very fabric of her world, and to underestimate the fierce ingenuity and compassion that drove her. Her practice was a holistic art, a comprehensive approach to life and death that embraced every available resource, from the earth beneath her feet to the heavens above. She was a master of the resources at hand, a profound innovator within the constraints of her era, dedicated heart and soul to the miraculous, dangerous journey of birth. The final push, the first cry, the exhaustion and the exhilaration. But the journey, the dangerous, miraculous journey, is far from over. The midwife's vigil does not end when the baby arrives. In many ways it has only just begun. The period immediately following birth, for both mother and child, was fraught with perils that modern medicine has only recently begun to understand and mitigate. Here, in the quiet aftermath of creation, the midwife became the ultimate guardian, the keeper of the cradle, tasked with guiding two fragile lives through their most vulnerable moments. You stand by the bedside, the air still thick with the scent of exertion and new life. The mother, spent but radiant, lies resting, her body now entering a critical phase of healing and recovery. For her, the midwife's strange medicines turned to regeneration and protection. The primary concern was the expulsion of the placenta, a final, crucial act. If it lingered, infection and hemorrhage could swiftly claim her life. The midwife would employ gentle massage, warmth, and specific herbal remedies believed to encourage the uterus to contract and release this vital afterbirth. You might see her offering a warm drink infused with herbs like shepherd's purse or cinnamon, known for their uterine-stimulating properties. These were not random choices. They were distilled wisdom, passed down through generations of observing nature's intricate dance with the human body. Then came the battle against infection, the invisible enemy that lurked in every shadow. Puerperal fever, often called childbed fever, was a dreaded killer claiming countless mothers' lives. Without understanding microscopic germs, the midwife still understood the importance of cleanliness, however rudimentary by today's standards. She would meticulously clean the birthing space and attend to the mother's wounds. You might observe her preparing herbal washes, perhaps with comfrey or plantain, steeped in warm water, to soothe and cleanse the perineum. These herbs were not just for comfort. They were believed to have healing, antiseptic properties, drawing out impurities and promoting tissue repair. A fresh linen might be placed beneath the mother, perhaps even a poultice applied to her belly, filled with warming herbs or spices to ward off chill and encourage the womb's return to its proper size. Rest and nutrition were paramount. The midwife, having overseen the most strenuous physical feat a woman can endure, would insist on quiet, warmth, and easily digestible, nourishing foods. You might be offered a rich broth, perhaps a gruel made from oats or barley, fortified with eggs or root vegetables. These were not mere comfort foods. They were vital sources of energy and nutrients, essential for restoring the mother's strength and establishing her milk supply. The midwife understood that a mother's recovery was intrinsically linked to her ability to nurture her newborn. But beyond the physical, there was the spiritual cleansing. Birth was seen as a powerful, sometimes dangerous, transition, leaving both mother and child vulnerable to unseen forces. You might witness a small ritual, a blessing, a prayer, the burning of specific incense, or the placement of protective charms near the bed. These practices, strange to the modern eye, were deeply meaningful to a people whose lives were intertwined with spiritual belief. They were medicines for the soul, bringing peace and a sense of security to a new mother in a world full of uncertainty. The midwife, in her role as a spiritual guide, would ease anxieties and reinforce the community's protective embrace around the new family. Now turn your attention to the tiny, fragile being cradled beside its mother, the newborn. Here, the midwife's role shifted from overseeing a powerful bodily process to safeguarding a delicate, utterly dependent life. Infant mortality was tragically high in the medieval world, a stark reality that shaped every aspect of newborn care. Every measure, no matter how peculiar it seems now, was driven by a fierce desire for survival. The first order of business, after ensuring a clear airway and that first momentous cry, was warmth and security. You would see the baby carefully swaddled, a practice not just for comfort, but to simulate the confined warmth of the womb, to prevent chilling and to provide a sense of security. The midwife might apply a bit of warmed oil or animal fat to the baby's skin, not merely for softness, but to create a protective barrier against the elements and to aid in cleaning. The umbilical cord, a direct link to life, was treated with utmost care. After being tied with a clean thread, it might be cauterized gently or dressed with a poultice of powdered herbs, ashes, or even a bit of spiderweb, all believed to prevent bleeding and infection. The intention was to ensure it dried and detached cleanly, protecting this vulnerable entry point into the baby's body. The first feeding was crucial. The midwife understood the power of colostrum, the nutrient-rich first milk, even if she did not know the science behind its antibodies. She would encourage the mother to offer her breast early, guiding the baby to latch. If the mother was too weak or unable to nurse, the midwife's knowledge extended to finding a wet nurse, a vital service in an era without formula. The survival of the infant often rested on this critical decision. Infant ailments were common and often fatal. Colic, teething pain, fevers, and respiratory illnesses preyed on the tiny bodies. The midwife had her arsenal of remedies. For a colicky baby, you might see her gently massaging the infant's belly or offering a tiny spoonful of an herbal infusion, perhaps chamomile or fennel, known for their soothing properties. For cradle cap, a mild oil or a decoction of herbs might be applied to the scalp. Fevers might be treated with cooling baths or compresses, or internal remedies believed to draw out the heat. These were careful, often small doses, given with an awareness of the baby's delicate system. Beyond physical remedies, much of infant care revolved around protection from the unseen. The medieval world was populated with spirits, fairies, and malevolent influences. A baby, unbaptized and innocent, was considered especially vulnerable. You might observe amulets tied to the cradle, perhaps a string of coral beads to ward off evil, or a small bag of protective herbs sewn into the swaddling clothes. Prayers and blessings were constant, a spiritual shield against danger. If a baby was sickly or cried incessantly, suspicions of a changeling could arise, a fairy child swapped for the human one. In these heartbreaking situations, the midwife, drawing on lore and experience, might perform rituals intended to identify or even repel the supposed changeling, often a desperate attempt to explain the inexplicable sorrow of infant loss. The midwife's skill was not just in delivering a baby, but in navigating the perilous waters of early life for both mother and child. She was a practitioner of holistic care, weaving together practical knowledge of herbs and the body, with deep-seated spiritual beliefs and the social customs of her time. Her methods, though strange to our ears, represented the sum total of human wisdom and compassion available in her era, all directed towards the most fundamental of human goals: survival and the continuation of life. You realize that her role as the cradle's keeper was immense, demanding incredible resilience, knowledge, and an unwavering commitment to the smallest, most vulnerable members of society. She was not just assisting at birth, she was guarding the very future of the community, one precious new life at a time. Every poultice, every potion, every whispered prayer was an act of profound dedication in the face of overwhelming odds.